It'll be ready in 15 minutes, the poor mechanic said. The millionaire scoffed, but then stopped. The midday sun beat down relentlessly on the cracked asphalt of the Mexican Federal Highway, creating those optical illusions that make the road look like it's melting in the distance. Aitana Alonso Hernandez tapped the steering wheel of her special edition black Range Rover with growing frustration, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. The digital dashboard lights flickered like dying stars in a galaxy slowly fading away. First, it had been the check engine light, then the temperature. Then, all the alerts lit up simultaneously in a chaotic symphony of warnings that she had arrogantly ignored for the last 30 kilometers. Her meeting with the Japanese investors from Toyota began in exactly 2 hours at the corporate offices in Polanco, Mexico City. It was the most important negotiation of her career. $400 million at stake. The possibility of expanding Alonso International to Asian markets. The opportunity to prove to her father that she was capable of taking the family empire to levels never before imagined. And there she was, stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless cornfields swaying in the hot breeze, cows watching her with absolute indifference from behind rusty fences, in the deafening silence of deep Mexico that she despised so much. Aitana Alonso Hernandez wasn't used to things going wrong since she was born 30 years ago in the most exclusive private hospital in Mexico City. Her life had been a perfectly orchestrated succession of scheduled successes. Education in Swiss boarding schools, university at Columbia, MBA at Harvard, internships at Goldman Sachs, all designed, all planned, bought with the infinite money of the Alonso family, owners of the largest automotive empire in Latin America. When she finally spotted the rusty, faded sign that read, Ruiz Auto Repair, General Repairs, a bitter, irony-laden laugh escaped her lips, painted with the most expensive Chanel rouge. The letters on the sign were so faded they could barely be read. Someone had tried to repaint some parts with a color that didn't even match the original. It was pathetic. What could she expect from a place like this? What kind of miracle could a village mechanic perform on a vehicle that cost more than what that man would probably earn in his entire life? The SUV coughed one last time like a dying animal, exhaling its final breath before stopping completely in front of a workshop that looked straight out of the 80s. The peeling red brick walls showed dark stains of humidity accumulated over decades and permanent puddles of oil that had penetrated so deeply into the material that they had become part of the structure itself. Rusty tools hung from crooked nails and exposed electrical wires. A calendar from 3 years ago was still stuck to a wall, showing an image of a woman in a bikini next to a classic Chevrolet. The penetrating smell of stale gasoline, burnt grease, and old oil permeated the hot air like an invisible but omnipresent fog. Aitana got out of her vehicle with deliberately slow movements, as if the very act of touching that place could contaminate her. Her 12-centimeter Louboutins, which had cost $1,100 at a boutique on Rodeo Drive, sank slightly into the dirt mixed with oil and grease residue on the ground. She felt nauseous. She wrinkled her perfectly operated nose with visible disgust, while searching in her $50,000 Hermes Birkin bag for a handkerchief to cover her mouth. The heat was unbearable. Her white silk blouse from Giorgio Armani was already beginning to stick uncomfortably to her back with sweat. "Hello, is anyone here?" she shouted impatiently, her voice loaded with that innate arrogance that only money and privilege can cultivate over generations. "I need help immediately." From the deepest shadows of the workshop, where the sunlight dared not penetrate, a figure slowly emerged. A man of about 35 years, perhaps a little older, with that undefined age of people who have worked too hard for too long under the relentless sun. His navy blue overalls were so completely stained with black grease, motor oil, transmission fluid, and accumulated grime that they looked like an abstract canvas painted by some tortured artist. The stains formed chaotic patterns that told the story of 1,000 repairs, 1,000 days of honest work, 1,000 moments of exhausting physical effort. Damian Ruiz Garza wiped his hands on a rag that was even dirtier than his calloused and cracked palms. His fingers showed scars from old cuts, burns from hot metal, permanent bruises from tools that had slipped. His dark brown eyes, deep as water wells in the desert, studied the woman in front of him with a complex mixture of existential weariness, resignation, and something else. Something that Aitana couldn't identify at that moment, but which made her feel inexplicably uncomfortable. "Good afternoon, miss," he said with a calm, almost resigned voice, with that authentic Mexican accent that Aitana had learned to consider inferior during her years at American universities. "How can I help you today?" Aitana pointed at her Range Rover with a dramatic and exaggerated gesture, as if the vehicle were a sick child requiring immediate emergency medical attention. "My truck broke down," she declared, as if announcing a national tragedy. "I need you to repair it right now at this precise instant. I have an absolutely crucial meeting in Mexico City and I cannot, under any circumstances, waste my time in—" She paused while looking around the workshop with barely disguised contempt, her upper lip curling slightly in an expression of disgust. "In a place like this, so I need you to work fast. Very fast. Do you understand?" Damian walked toward the vehicle without saying a single word, showing no reaction to the woman's condescending tone. His worn work boots, with the soles separating from the leather in some places, left tracks of dust and oil on the stained concrete floor. He opened the hood with precise, economical movements, like a cardiovascular surgeon who knows exactly where to make the incision to reach the heart without causing unnecessary damage. The engine was still smoking slightly, the intense heat distorting the air above the shiny and expensive metal parts. He leaned over the engine, his head partially disappearing into the mechanical entrails of the vehicle. He listened, observed, touched cables and hoses with expert fingers that knew every secret an engine could keep, every whisper a defective part could make, every vibration indicating a specific problem. It was like watching a doctor examining a patient, but this doctor didn't have university degrees framed on fancy walls. He only had years of experience, skilled hands, and deep knowledge earned through hard work. Atana watched him with her arms crossed over her chest, tapping the ground with her heel in an impatient rhythm that marked every lost second. The sun burned her pale skin, which she kept meticulously protected with expensive treatments at exclusive Beverly Hills spas, imported creams from Switzerland costing $500 a jar, and monthly laser sessions ensuring not a single age spot dared appear on her perfect face. Her latest generation iPhone vibrated constantly in her bag. Messages from her personal assistant asking where she was, emails from lawyers reviewing contracts, missed calls from her father demanding updates. But she ignored it all, too annoyed, too frustrated to be trapped in this place forgotten by God and civilization. After exactly 5 minutes of absolute silence, interrupted only by the distant buzzing of insects in the cornfields and the occasional metallic sound of tools touching metal, Damian closed the hood gently, almost tenderly, and wiped his hands once more on the useless rag that only redistributed the grease instead of removing it. "It's the mass airflow sensor and a cooling system hose that burst from excessive pressure," he explained with professional calm, his voice devoid of emotion. "It had probably been showing minor symptoms for days that you ignored. The hose is completely destroyed and the sensor is burned out. I have the spare parts here in my inventory. They are high-quality universal parts that work perfectly on your model. It will be ready in exactly 15 minutes. The silence that followed was so dense and heavy, it seemed to have physical substance. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped. Even the buzzing of the insects seemed to fade. Then, like a storm finally breaking it after days of overcast skies, Aitana began to laugh. It wasn't a polite or discreet laugh, the kind high society women learn in etiquette classes. It was an open, cruel, ruthless cackle, loaded with all the classism and arrogance that 30 years of absolute privilege can cultivate in a soul. A laugh that echoed within the dilapidated walls of the workshop like the crack of a whip against bare flesh. She took off her limited edition Chanel sunglasses to look him directly in the eyes. And in her emerald green gaze, there was so much contempt, so much concentrated poison, that Damian felt something in his chest contract painfully, like a fist squeezing his heart. 15 minutes, she repeated between laughs that made her shoulders shake. "You're telling me that you, a village mechanic, a man who works in this—" She searched for the most offensive words she could find. "This dump are going to fix in 15 minutes what the certified mechanics at the official Range Rover agency, with all their state-of-the-art diagnostic computers and specialized tools that cost more than this entire workshop, couldn't even diagnose correctly in 3 full days. Please don't make me laugh more than I already am. Miss, I am just telling you the truth about— Look at this place, she interrupted him abruptly, pointing around with a theatrical gesture of her arm. Look at yourself. Do you seriously expect me to trust my Range Rover, a vehicle that cost $100,000, that has technology more advanced than what you've probably seen in your entire life, to someone who works in a workshop that literally looks about to collapse with the next strong breeze? To someone who can't even keep his work overalls clean? To someone whose tools look like they were taken from an antiques museum? Damian slowly lowered his gaze to his work clothes. That navy blue garment stained with the viscous and permanent stories of 1,000 successful repairs, 1,000 days of honest work under the sun that burned without mercy, 1,000 moments when he had helped stranded people exactly like this arrogant woman was now. His hands, rough as sandpaper from years of friction against metal and tools, marked by scars forming a map of his working life, clenched involuntarily into tight fists. His knuckles turned white. Veins stood out under his tanned skin, but he said nothing. He didn't insult her. He didn't defend himself. He just looked at her with those dark eyes that held an infinite ocean of untold stories, of silent pain, of unbreakable dignity, despite poverty and contempt. And it was precisely in that tense moment, charged with emotional electricity, in that precise instant, frozen in time, that Aitana saw something that made her stop abruptly. Her laughter died out like a candle burning down to nothing. There was something disturbing in the way he looked at her, something strangely familiar in the deep, ancient sadness of his eyes, something in the strong line of his square jaw, something in the specific tilt of his head when he was thinking. Something that triggered a blurry, distant memory in the deepest part of her mind, like a faded photograph someone finds at the bottom of a forgotten drawer. "Do we know each other from somewhere?" she asked suddenly, her voice losing part of that automatic arrogance, studying his face with new intensity. "Your face looks familiar." Damian looked away toward the distant horizon, where the endless cornfields swayed hypnotically in the hot afternoon breeze. A bitter smile, loaded with cruel irony and poorly disguised pain, slowly crossed his cracked lips, dry from years of exposure to the relentless sun. "No, Miss Alonso," he replied with a voice that trembled barely perceptibly, like a wire about to snap under too much tension. "You definitely do not know me. You have never met me. You don't even know I exist. But I know perfectly well who you are. I know everything about you." Those words fell between them like heavy stones thrown into a deep, dark well, creating ripples that expanded in ever-widening circles. Atana felt a strange chill run down her spine despite the suffocating heat that made the air almost unbreathable. There was something unsettling in this man's tone of voice, something loaded with hidden meaning in the specific way he pronounced those words, that awakened a primitive unease in her, a premonition that something important was about to be revealed, something that would fundamentally change her understanding of reality. "What the hell do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice taking on a defensive tone. "Are you threatening me? Are you some kind of stalker? Because I swear if you are—" Damian shook his head slowly, almost with sadness. "It's nothing like that, miss. It's just that—" He paused for a long time, as if gathering the courage to continue. "Your life and mine are connected in a way you've never bothered to discover, in a way you probably don't even remember. Because for people like you, people like me and my family are invisible. We exist only when you need us. We disappear when we are no longer useful." "Explain yourself right now," Aitana demanded, feeling panic beginning to slowly climb up her throat like a poisonous vine. "What exactly are you talking about?" Damian walked slowly back toward the dark interior of the workshop, his shoulders slumped under the invisible but crushing weight of something he had carried for years. He stopped at the threshold of shadow and light, his back to her, and when he spoke, his voice sounded as if it came from very far away, from a place of pain so deep that words could barely express it. "Alonso Hernandez," he began, and the use of her full name without an honorific title startled her. "Only daughter of Rodrigo Alonso Mendoza and Gabriela Hernandez de Alonso, direct heiress to the Alonso International Automotive Empire, valued at approximately $2 billion, turned 30 on March 20th of this very year, exactly 8 months and 2 days ago. Studied primary education at the Swiss School in Mexico City, middle school at the American Institute, high school at the British Academy, university at Columbia, New York. Specialization in business administration with honors, MBA Harvard Business School, professional internships at Goldman Sachs. Currently lives alone in a 400 square meter penthouse in Santa Fe that cost $7 million dollars and has a panoramic view of the entire city. How do you know all that? Aitana interrupted him, her voice rising several pitches in growing panic. Who the hell are you? How do you have access to such personal and detailed information about my life? Damian finally turned slowly. His eyes shone with unshed tears, with accumulated years of contained pain, with suffering so deep it threatened to overflow like a dam about to break. I am the son of Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza, he said with a broken voice, every word costing him visible effort. The woman who worked faithfully for 25 consecutive years as a live-in maid at your parents' main mansion in Las Lomas. The woman who raised you and your older brother Leonardo as if you were her own blood children. The woman who dedicated the best decades of her life to feeding you, cleaning up after you, healing your scraped knees, drying your tears, listening to your teenage problems. The woman who sacrificed her own family for yours. The woman who died exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago, completely alone in a third-rate public hospital, without you, the children she loved as her own for a quarter of a century, deigning to visit her even once in her final weeks of agony, without attending her funeral, without sending flowers, without asking what had happened to her. Aitana's world stopped completely. The noise of the wind in the corn vanished. The distant buzzing of the insects faded. The beating of her own heart became deafening in her ears. Rosa Maria. How could she have forgotten that name? How could she have erased from her memory the person who had been more of a mother to her than her own biological mother? Rosa Maria, the woman with the perpetually warm smile, who made her frothy hot chocolate with cinnamon when Aitana had terrible nightmares, who healed her scraped knees with soft kisses and Band-Aids decorated with princess drawings, who sang her traditional Mexican lullabies when her parents were too busy building their empire to notice their daughter needed attention, who taught her to make French braids and told her stories of her hometown in Oaxaca, who cooked the most delicious mole Aitana had ever tasted in her life, who comforted her when cruel children at school made fun of her, who celebrated every one of her achievements as if they were her own. Rosa Maria, whispered Aitana, the name leaving her lips like a prayer forgotten for too long, like a sin finally confessed. She was my mother, Damian completed, tears now running freely down his grease-stained cheeks, leaving clean tracks on his tan skin. My mother, who literally broke her back, working 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, so she could send me enough money for school. My mother, who never complained once when she had to miss my middle school soccer games because her millionaire bosses needed her to organize a last-minute business dinner. My mother, who couldn't attend my high school graduation because you decided that same day to take a surprise family trip to Cancun and she had to accompany you. My mother, who died completely alone, with no one to hold her hand, in the saturated emergency room of a public hospital where there weren't even beds available, because she didn't have the money to pay for a decent private hospital. While you, the family she had served for a quarter of a century, were celebrating your father's 60th birthday on a luxury yacht anchored in the crystal clear waters of the Caribbean. Each word was a sharp dagger plunging deeply into Aitana's chest. Each revelation was a slap that made her face burn with shame. Memories began to crowd her mind like a raging river, finally breaking a weak dam. Rosa Maria patiently teaching her to tie her shoes when she was 5 years old. Rosa Maria singing Las Mañanitas every birthday with that sweet, off-key voice. Rosa Maria with her white apron, always immaculately clean, her hands rough from so much washing and scrubbing, but incredibly gentle when combing her hair. Rosa Maria preparing her lunchbox every morning for school with little love notes written on napkins. Rosa Maria waiting up late for her when she was a teenager and went out to parties, making sure she arrived home safe and sound. I, I didn't know she had passed away, murmured Aitana, feeling her legs begin to tremble violently, threatening to give way. Nobody told me absolutely anything. I was in New York closing a deal and do you sincerely believe that matters? Damian's voice rose considerably in pitch. Years and years of accumulated resentment, of stored pain, of contained rage finally surfacing like lava from a volcano that has been dormant too long. Do you think being busy justifies completely abandoning someone who literally dedicated their entire life to caring for you? She worked for your family since I was just 10 years old. 25 full years of her existence, Miss Alonso. 25 years watching your children grow, mature, become successful adults, while her own son waited for her every night in an empty, cold house, wondering why his mom couldn't be at his school play, at his first track meet, at his 15th birthday, which is so important in our culture. Do you have any idea what it's like to be a child and have to share your mother with rich strangers who can pay generously for her time, her energy, her love? Do you know what it feels like to grow up knowing you are the second priority of your own mother? Not by her choice, but by desperate economic necessity. Aitana slumped heavily against the door of her Range Rover, her legs finally giving way under the emotional weight of these revelations. Tears began to flow copiously from her eyes, dragging with them the imported $200 mascara she had carefully applied that morning in her glass and steel penthouse overlooking the city skyline. She never complained, Damian continued, his voice now softer but no less loaded with pain. Not once in 25 years. She always said you were good kids deep down, that you treated her with relative respect. She said that you, especially Miss Aitana, had a genuinely kind heart hidden under all that high-class education, under all those layers of privilege. I told her over and over again that she was completely crazy, that you were just using her like all domestic workers, that for people like you, we are simply replaceable labor. But she stubbornly insisted that someday, when you fully grew up and matured, you would finally understand the true value of people like her. People who give everything without expecting anything in return except a miserable salary that barely covers survival. The silence that followed was completely different from before. It was no longer hostile or uncomfortable. It wasn't the tense silence of two strangers facing off. It was the sacred, heavy silence of shared pain, of two lives that had crossed tragically through a woman who had loved everyone unconditionally despite her own constant suffering. It was the silence of painful truths finally spoken aloud. It was the silence of guilt that cannot be denied. Why did we never look for her after she retired? Aitana asked aloud, more to herself than to Damian, while tears continued to run down her perfectly made-up cheeks. After 25 years of loyal service, she simply disappeared from our lives as if she had never existed, as if she were an old piece of furniture we no longer needed. How could we be so cruel, so indifferent? Because for people like you, Damian replied with bitterness that had been distilled over years, people like us are completely invisible. We are physically present when you need us urgently. We disappear conveniently when we are no longer useful to your privileged lives. We are part of the decor, part of the furniture. You pay us, yes, but you never see us as complete human beings with our own lives, our own families, our own dreams, our own pain. My mother died firmly believing that she had at least made a significant difference in your lives. His voice broke completely. I desperately want to believe she was right, that her sacrifice meant something, that it wasn't completely in vain. Aitana wiped her tears with the trembling back of her hand, inevitably staining her 1,500 Giorgio Armani white silk blouse with runny makeup. For the first time in her entire adult life, in 30 full years of privileged existence, she didn't care absolutely anything about dirtying something expensive. She looked at Damian. She really looked at him for the first time since she had arrived, and she saw in him the unmistakable features of Rosa Maria, the same kind eyes despite the accumulated pain, the same characteristic tilt of the head when thinking deeply, The same firm jawline, the same unbreakable dignity, despite crushing poverty. "I'm sorry," she finally said with a voice barely audible, broken by emotion. "I know perfectly well that those words mean absolutely nothing now after so much time, but I say them anyway because they are the only thing I have. I am so sorry. You are absolutely right about everything. We were complete selfish people, terrible ingrates. Your mother gave us so much unconditional love, so much genuine care, so much of herself, and we didn't even ask her if she was okay when she retired. We didn't even bother to keep in touch. We simply erased her from our lives like deleting an unnecessary file from a computer." Damian nodded slowly, wiping his tears with the same grease-dirty rag he used to clean engine parts, leaving dark stains on his face that mixed oil with salty tears. "My mother left something specifically for you, Bum," he said after a long silence loaded with meaning. "She kept it for years, hoping to someday be able to give it to you personally, but that day never came. Wait here a moment." He disappeared completely into the dark, cool interior of the workshop, leaving Aitana absolutely alone with her torturous thoughts and overwhelming shame. She looked around the place with completely new eyes, as if seeing for the first time. She no longer saw a dilapidated and dirty workshop. She saw the honest livelihood of a man who probably worked as tirelessly hard as his mother had done all her life. She saw the antique tools, organized meticulously with care despite their evident age. She saw the diligently swept floor, despite the permanent and impossible to remove oil stains that had become part of the concrete. She saw the deep dignity that exists in poverty when that poverty is the product of honest work. She saw everything she had been blind to for 30 full years. Damian returned carefully, holding an old, faded shoebox tied with a pink ribbon that had once been bright but was now faded by the passage of time. He handed it to Aitana with trembling hands, as if delivering something sacred, a priceless relic. "I found this hidden among her most precious things after she died," he explained softly. "It has your name written on the lid. I think she wanted you to have it." With fingers trembling uncontrollably from emotion, Aitana opened the box slowly, almost with reverence. Inside were photographs, dozens and dozens of them. Photos of her and her brother, Leonardo, when they were small children, smiling innocently next to Rosa Maria in the perfectly manicured gardens of the family mansion. Images of birthdays celebrated, Christmases full of expensive gifts, first days of school with new uniforms. In every photograph, absolutely every one, Rosa Maria looked at them with so much genuine love, with so much maternal pride, with so much tenderness, that Aitana physically felt her heart literally breaking into two painful halves. But there was something else at the bottom of the box. Letters. Dozens of letters carefully written in Rosa Maria's characteristic handwriting, that impeccable calligraphy she had learned in rural schools in Oaxaca, all addressed to her but never sent, never delivered. Aitana took the first letter with trembling hands and began to read. "Sami, dear and precious Aitana, today you turned 10 and I watched you blow out the candles on your giant 3-tier cake as if you were making the most important wish in the whole world. I also made a wish in silence, that you never lose that special spark in your eyes, that natural kindness that makes you different from other rich children. The world is going to harden you inevitably, beautiful girl of my heart, but please don't let it take away what makes you truly special." She picked up another letter dated 5 years later. "Aitanita of my soul, today I saw you arguing heatedly with your father because you wanted to donate all your dolls and old toys to needy children at the municipal orphanage. Your father firmly said that the Alonzos don't do public charity because it gives a bad image. But I saw how you secretly hid 3 huge boxes of toys in the trunk of my car so I could take them without anyone finding out. That is the kind heart I ask God every day for you to protect and nurture always, no matter what." Another one written when Aitana was 18. "My little girl who isn't such a little girl anymore. Today I saw you crying in your room because your boyfriend left you for another girl. I wanted to come in and comfort you like when you were little, but you are almost a woman now and I know you need your space. But I heard everything you said crying about how you feel pressured to be perfect all the time, about how you are afraid of disappointing your parents. about how sometimes you just want to be a normal person without so much money and so much responsibility. I want you to know that you are perfect exactly as you are, with all your beautiful imperfections. Money doesn't define your worth, your heart does. Atana read letter after letter after letter, each one a moving testimony of the absolutely unconditional love of a woman who had seen in her a luminous potential that she herself had completely forgotten, that she had buried under layers and layers of acquired cynicism and learned arrogance. She cried uncontrollably until she had no more tears left to shed, until her perfect $200 makeup was just a stained and blurry memory on her swollen face. She loved you deeply, Damian said softly, his own voice loaded with contained emotion. Despite everything, despite your family's indifference, despite the sacrifices she had to make, she sincerely loved you as if you were her own blood daughter. She always said that someday you would remember who you really are in your essence, beyond the inherited money and the prestigious last name. I don't deserve this love, Aitana sobbed between hiccups. I don't deserve absolutely any of this. I became exactly what she feared. A woman completely empty inside, arrogant, superficial, who measures people's worth exclusively by their bank account and zip code. You can still change radically, said Damian, and for the first time since they had met less than an hour ago, his voice contained not a trace of resentment, only genuine and fragile hope. My mother firmly believed in second chances. She said it is never, absolutely never, too late to be who you really want to become the best version of yourself. Aitana looked at Damian with completely new eyes, as if she were seeing him for the first time as a complete human being and not just a simple poor mechanic. She saw the authentic humility in his slightly hunched posture. She saw the deep dignity in his honest work. She saw the immense love for his mother in every word he spoke, and she realized something fundamental that hit her like lightning. This man, this human being literally covered in black grease and living in poverty, was infinitely richer than her in absolutely everything that really mattered in life. Let me fix your truck, Damian said suddenly, breaking the moment charged with emotion. It will truly be ready in exactly 15 minutes, as I told you. But not because I want to prove anything or prove I'm right, but because it is simply my job and I do it with professional pride. It is exactly what my mother taught me since I was little. Do absolutely everything with excellence and dedication, no matter how small or insignificant it seems. Aitana nodded silently, completely unable to articulate coherent words. Damian set to work with efficient and precise movements, and she watched him in silence, reverent. She saw how his hands, despite being covered in permanent black grease, moved with the absolutely surgical precision of a cardiovascular surgeon. She saw how he spoke softly to the engine, almost whispering, as if the cold metal parts could really understand and respond to his gentleness. She saw in each of his movements the same meticulous care, the same obsessive attention to detail that Rosa Maria put into every household task, no matter how mundane or repetitive it was. Exactly 15 minutes later, timed with almost military precision, the engine roared powerfully to life, perfect, smooth, balanced, as if it had never had absolutely any mechanical problem. Damian closed the hood carefully and wiped his hands once more on the eternally dirty rag. It is completely ready, he said simply, without fanfare or arrogance. You can get to your very important meeting in Mexico City without problems. Aitana approached him slowly, searching in her Hermes bag. She took out her Italian leather checkbook, engraved with her initials in gold. How much do I owe you exactly for the repair? She asked. Damian looked her directly in the eyes and shook his head firmly. Nothing at all. This is a completely free gift in memory of my mother. She definitely would have wanted to help you without charging anything. No, replied Aitana with a firmness that surprised even herself. I absolutely cannot accept that. Please, Damian, let me pay you appropriately. Let me do at least this correctly. Damian sighed deeply, thinking. 300 Mexican pesos, he finally said. It is exactly what I normally charge for this specific type of repair to any customer. Aitana looked at the laughable, almost insulting number. 300 pesos. She routinely spent more than that on a single latte at Starbucks. Yet for Damian, it probably represented the hard work of half a full day under the scorching sun. She carefully wrote a check for 500,000 Mexican pesos and extended it to him with a trembling hand. No, said Damian immediately, physically backing away as if the check were something dangerous. I definitely cannot accept that. It is too much. It is completely absurd. It is not condescending charity, said Aitana with fresh tears running down her cheeks. It is a moral debt, a debt that I will never in my life be able to pay completely. No matter how much money I give you, your mother dedicated 25 full years of her only life to caring for us, loving us, raising us. And we never, not once, thanked her appropriately. Please, please let me do this, not for you specifically, but for her memory, for everything she sacrificed. Damian looked at the check for a long moment. Then he looked Aitana directly in the eyes, trying to discern if this was genuine or just temporary guilt, and finally nodded slowly, taking it with hands that trembled visibly. There is one more absolutely important thing, Aitana said, taking out her latest generation iPhone. Do you have other significant dreams besides keeping this workshop running? Something you always desperately wanted to do but couldn't due to a complete lack of financial resources? Damian laughed bitterly, a humorless, real laugh. Dreams, he repeated as if the word were foreign. Yes, I used to have many when I was young and naive. I wanted to study automotive mechanical engineering at UNAM, the national university. I had won a full scholarship for academic merit, but when my mother got seriously ill with cancer, I had to turn down the scholarship to stay here, take care of her day and night, and work constantly to pay for her expensive medicines and chemotherapy treatments that public insurance didn't cover. Now I'm 35 years old. It is definitely too late for those youthful dreams. It is never, absolutely never too late to pursue what you really want, said Aitana with growing conviction, her fingers flying over the touchscreen of her phone. Alonzo International has an extensive scholarship program for adults who want to resume their interrupted studies, and coincidentally, I am precisely the one who personally approves all final applications. Considering your evident mechanical skills and your personal history, I sincerely believe you are exactly the type of person we are desperately looking for. Miss Aitana, I really can't. Yes, you can and you will, she interrupted him firmly, and you are going to do it without arguing, not as a condescending favor from me, but because it is exactly what you deserve on your own merit. It is what your mother would have wanted to see. It is the dream she had for you. Damian covered his face completely with his greasy hands and cried openly, without shame. He cried for all the years irretrievably lost, for the painfully postponed dreams, for the extraordinary mother who never lived to see his come true. And Aitana cried with him. Two apparently strange human beings, but deeply united by the unconditional love of an absolutely extraordinary woman who had taught them in very different ways and through opposite paths what it really meant to be rich in spirit. When Aitana finally got into her perfectly repaired Range Rover, she was no longer remotely the same arrogant woman who had arrived just 2 hours earlier. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw Damian standing in front of his humble workshop, holding the check with disbelief and looking at the clear blue sky as if he were deeply thanking someone up there, his mother, resting in peace. She took out her phone and, with trembling but determined fingers, completely canceled the crucial meeting with the Japanese investors from Toyota. $400 million could wait. There was something infinitely more important, more urgent, more fundamental to do with her life. 3 months later, on a sunny day in December, Aitana was standing solemnly in front of the grave of Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza in a modest but well-kept cemetery on the outskirts of the city. She had personally ordered a completely new imported pink marble headstone with a carefully selected inscription that read, Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza, an exemplary mother to many, an earthly angel to all who knew her. Next to her was Damian, dressed in new but deliberately simple clothes, nothing ostentatious. In his student backpack, he carried new textbooks for his first semester of automotive mechanical engineering at UNAM. The full scholarship that Aitana had secured for him covered absolutely everything. Full tuition, all necessary books, a small but dignified apartment near the university campus, and a monthly amount for living expenses. I sincerely believe she would be incredibly proud of both of us, said Aitana softly, placing fresh flowers next to the headstone. She always firmly believed in second chances, replied Damian, kneeling to touch the cold stone with reverence, and that people can fundamentally change if they really want to. Aitana had changed radically. She had voluntarily resigned from half of her executive corporate responsibilities at Alonzo International to dedicate herself full-time to the scholarship program, which she had expanded exponentially. Now she directly helped hundreds of people, exactly like Damian, to pursue their dreams long postponed by economic circumstances. She had sold her pretentious $7 million penthouse in Santa Fe and moved to a significantly more modest apartment, donating the entire substantial difference to educational causes and support programs for children of domestic workers. But the absolutely most important thing, the most transformative thing, was that she had finally learned to see people, really see them as complete human beings. Not as fungible employees on a payroll, not as anonymous names on a corporate list, but as human beings with complex stories, valid dreams, families who need them, hearts that feel as deeply as hers. Do you know what is the most deeply ironic thing about all this? Said Aitana as they slowly walked away from the cemetery. That transformative day when I cruelly mocked you and you said with such confidence that it would be ready in 15 minutes. You didn't just repair my expensive truck. You fundamentally repaired my entire life in exactly 15 minutes. You showed me everything I had lost by becoming who I was. Damian smiled genuinely. That luminous smile that Aitana now immediately recognized as identical to Rosa Maria's. My mother used to constantly say that God works in absolutely mysterious ways. Maybe that specific day wasn't a simple mechanical accident. Maybe it was exactly what we both desperately needed to find. 6 months later, Aitana organized a massive official ceremony at the main corporate facilities of Alonzo International. It was the public launch of the Rosa Maria Ruiz Scholarship Program, designed specifically and exclusively for children of domestic employees, service workers, and anyone of low income with demonstrable academic potential. Damian was proudly the first official scholar to successfully graduate from the pilot program. During her emotional inaugural speech, Aitana told the complete story without omitting anything. She spoke extensively of Rosa Maria, of her absolutely unconditional love, of how she had tenderly raised children who were not biologically hers while her own son grew up alone waiting for her every night. She spoke with shame of that transformative day in the workshop, of how exactly 15 minutes had irreversibly changed the entire course of her life. And she spoke passionately of the most important lesson she had learned, that the true value of a person is not measured by their bulging bank account, but by the size of their heart. There wasn't a single dry eye in the corporate auditorium of 500 people. Employees who had worked silently for the Alonso family for decades cried openly, some sobbing. Aitana saw in their diverse faces the same dignified features she had seen in Rosa Maria and Damian. Unbreakable dignity, resilient hope against all odds, and a deep love for work well done, no matter how invisible it may be. The program grew exponentially year after year. Hundreds of children of service workers now had real access to quality education that was previously absolutely impossible. Some became doctors who returned to serve their communities. Others engineers who developed accessible technology. Others dedicated teachers who returned to rural schools to help more children escape the cycle of poverty. Damian graduated with academic honors in automotive mechanical engineering and opened his own successful consultancy, specializing in making the automotive industry more economically accessible for low-income people. But he never, absolutely never, closed the humble original workshop. It had become a powerful symbol, a constant reminder of where he had started and why he did exactly what he did. On the fifth solemn anniversary of Rosa Maria's death, Aitana and Damian returned to visit her grave, but this time they were not alone. With them were 50 scholarship recipients from the program, all carrying fresh flowers and handwritten letters of gratitude for a woman they never met personally, but whose extraordinary legacy had irrevocably changed their lives. The legacy of Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza was not measured in accumulated money or material possessions. It was measured in completely transformed lives, in lessons painfully learned, in love multiplied exponentially. And while Aitana and Damian tirelessly continued their work expanding the program every year, helping more needy families, creating more opportunities where none existed before, that powerful legacy kept growing. Because in the end, Rosa Maria was absolutely right about everything. It is never too late to be who you really want to be. It is never too late to see the inherent value in others. And it is never, absolutely never too late for 15 minutes to change absolutely everything forever. 10 years after that transformative day in the workshop, Aitana Alonso Hernandez stood on the main stage of the International Philanthropy Forum in Geneva, Switzerland. She had been invited as a keynote speaker to talk about her revolutionary work in accessible education. The Rosa Maria Ruiz Scholarship Program, now operated in 12 Latin American countries, had directly benefited more than 5,000 students and had been internationally recognized as an exemplary model of genuine corporate social responsibility. But for Aitana, the numbers were secondary. What mattered were the individual stories. The young woman who became the first doctor in her family, the boy who designed water purification systems for rural communities, the woman who opened a free school in her hometown. Damian was in the audience, now director of engineering of his own automotive company, which employed hundreds of people and specialized in accessible electric vehicles for low-income communities. He wore a small photograph of his mother in his suit pocket, as he always did on important occasions. When Aitana finished her speech, she received a standing ovation that lasted a full 5 minutes. But as she walked down from the stage, the only thing she could think about was that hot afternoon, that humble workshop, those 15 minutes that had changed everything. That night, Aitana and Damian dined together in a simple restaurant, reminiscing. They didn't need luxurious places to enjoy each other's company. The deep friendship they had built over these 10 years was more valuable than any gourmet meal. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that day your truck hadn't broken down," said Damian thoughtfully. "I would have closed the negotiation with Toyota," replied Aitana. "I would have won $400 million. I would have continued my life exactly the same, empty and without real purpose." She paused. "Thank God my Range Rover broke down exactly where it broke down." Damian raised his glass of sparkling water. "To my mother," he said, "who taught us that true love knows no social class boundaries." "To Rosa Maria," Aitana replied, "who saved me from myself." They toasted in silence, two souls who had found redemption in the memory of an extraordinary woman. The original workshop still existed, preserved exactly as it was that day. Aitana had bought it and turned it into a living museum, a place where low-income youth could learn automotive mechanics for free. On the main wall hung a huge portrait of Rosa Maria, smiling with that warmth that had characterized every moment of her life. Under the portrait, a bronze plaque read, "Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza taught that true wealth is not in what you accumulate, but in what you give. That dignity does not require money. That love knows no social classes, and that 15 minutes of honesty can change the world." Every graduate of the scholarship program visited that place before receiving their degree. It was a reminder of where they had started, of why they were where they were, of the woman whose silent sacrifice had made their dreams possible. And every time someone visited the museum, the engine of Aitana's original Range Rover, preserved in perfect working order, was ceremonially started, roaring to life just as it had that day, because some moments are too important to forget. Some encounters are too transformative to be coincidence. And some people, even if they are no longer physically present, never really die as long as their love continues to change lives. Rosa Maria Ruiz Garza lived in every student who received a scholarship, in every family that escaped poverty through education, in every act of kindness Aitana performed daily, in every moment Damian used his success to help others. Her legacy was not of stone or metal. It was of transformed lives, of renewed hope, of love that multiplies eternally. And it had all started with 15 minutes, in a humble workshop with a poor mechanic who dared to tell the truth, and with an arrogant woman who finally had the courage to listen. 15 minutes that changed everything forever. Yeah.